Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we are covering projection. There's a lot of information out there about projection, but what I'm going to try to give you is a deeper look. And I'm hoping to do it in a way that really shows you how complex it is and how it's not just a one-person job, it's a two-person job, really. It takes two people to make a projection, like give it the projection energy. And without that, it's just a thought or a feeling or something, like just energy thrown out there. It takes two people to receive it and to embody it. And so I'm gonna hopefully help you think about where projections live in you and when you're doing that and when you're getting them from other people, and give you lots of examples to help you think about that. And my goal really is to help you see that we all do this. We all use projections. We project out good things, bad things, all kinds of things. And the more we can understand those in ourselves and recognize them in ourselves, the more smoothly our relationships will go. And I mean also our relationship with ourselves. So it just kind of smooths things out when you stop projecting all the time and start looking at, where is that really coming from? Where's that thought really coming from? Where's the evidence for that? And you loosen it up a little bit. And a lot of people say, and this is why I put this in the title, a lot of people say that this is like narcissists who do this, and this is really all of us all the time. And the more you can be aware of it, I think the better off you'll feel. So let's get into it. You know, and I'm glad I just use my phone to film, and I can't see myself because I have the phone, you know, filming in the right way. And I'm really thinking about my Countess Wen de Lesseps hair today. And I'm just glad I'm not focused on that, you know, not making you deal with it. Anyway, I have to look back and forth at my notes, but I'm here. Okay, so who came up with this idea of projection? Let's just start there, just a brief bit of history. Who came up with it? So from my reading, and I've done a lot of reading in psychoanalysis, it was Freud that came up with it. And then there have been analytic theorists since him that have developed it further. And then other kinds of therapies, coaches, teachers, whatever, like they kind of shift the language around to make it fit to whatever they want it to fit for or use it for. But from my experience in studying this, it came from Freud. People have a lot of things to say about Freud, but that's a story for another time. Why do we want to look at them? Because, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, the more you can recognize them in yourself and in other people, just the more smoothly your relationships will go. The more open you are to seeing that, the more you can actually learn about yourself and you can trace these things back. You can really learn a lot about yourself. And the more you can do that, the more you can own in yourself. And the more you can own, the less you're pushing out into other people, which people really like. People really like it when you're not pushing your stuff on them. Don't you? I do. I cannot stand it when people are pushing their stuff on me and putting their stuff on me. It feels bad to all of us. So this is to help you think about what this is and how to find it in you. A note about that, we all use them, and it's okay as long as you're willing to be flexible with them and take them back into yourself. So they become problematic when they're really overused, when this defense is really overused, and when it's rigid and you don't care about any evidence to the contrary. You have your mind made up about someone or something and you won't hear anything else. That is a good sign that there's something in you don't want to look at or own. I'm going to look at this from two different perspectives. There's the one-person perspective and the two-person perspective. And then I'll try and weave them together. And I'll just be upfront, like, this is sort of a common phrase used, a common term used, projection, but it is pretty, the process of it from mind to mind, from one mind to another mind, is really complex. I'm going to try and talk about it as simply as possible, but we'll see how it goes. So let's start from your mind and back in time. So somewhere back in time, you experienced a feeling, a thought, a person, you had an interaction with a person or an experience with a person that was too much for you. It was intolerable, unwanted, you don't like it, you have some judgment about it, whatever. And so what you end up doing is you push it down. You push it down and forget it's there. It's still running around in there, kind of controlling things, but you've pushed it down. And because you have pushed it down, you know, like I say, you don't know it's there and you have disowned it. You don't own it as something about you. And you end up seeing it in other people because you actually end up, the pressure sort of mounts inside of you around this thing that you don't want to look at. And it ends up getting expelled or pushed out through projection. And you see it in someone else or in a group of people, and you sort of look at it there and you judge it there. You have a big feeling around it there. And it's sort of like it's safer to do that in other people and look at it there than it is to do in yourself. You're just not ready to do that in yourself yet. This is most likely to happen the less well you know someone, so, which kind of makes sense, right? The less you know about them, the more you can project onto them. And so the better you get to know someone, the more whole you see them and the less you project into them, hopefully. And this is where relationships become problematic, is when you do know each other, but you're still really rigid and projecting things into each other, and not being willing to see any evidence to the contrary, and being really rigid about that. So it's more likely to happen in a relationship when there's something going on in the relationship, there's stress, like something's happening, and you're probably feeling more disconnected and therefore seeing each other less well, less clearly, and so you project more into the person. Some people think this starts as babies, and we start this process as babies, but it's more physical then. So, and I have seen this. I did a infant observation course, and you will see babies, like babies don't have words and babies can't talk and express what they're feeling, so they use other means for it, because babies do have feelings, right? So, you know, you might see them spit up, or they bite or stuff like that. And it's their way of getting the feeling out. They don't want to feel something and they get it out, right? And as the mind develops, we start to do the projecting there, and it takes place there instead of like the physical ways, hopefully, actually. Let's talk about some examples of this one person view, like where we're just looking at it in ourselves first, and before we move on to the two person view. You find yourself hating someone, but before you can even think about it, you think that feeling is unacceptable. You're not supposed to feel that. It gets pushed down, and what actually ends up coming out of your mind is, he hates me. So it gets turned around, and you think you see the hate in someone else, or you feel like you really want to hurt someone actually, but you find that unacceptable and not okay. So that gets pushed down pretty quickly, but you end up thinking, they want to hurt me. Look at what they're doing. They want to hurt me. And you forget that you had that feeling in the first place. That kind of came from you. Even if that person may be feeling it too, like you felt it first. And like I can do this, I used to do this a lot, where I would meet people, we would hang out with them, spend time with them, and it would be going fine. And at the end, I would be like, they don't like me. I don't think they like me. And I would say this to my husband. He'd be like, babe, what are you talking about? And really, it's probably that I didn't totally like them, but this got turned around in me. The next one, so that's like if you have a feeling that you don't want. And so next I'll give you an example. This can happen in a relationship where one person is saying this like really calmly to their partner, like, you're such an angry person, or you're really angry right now. And really they're angry and they have pushed it down. You can see this on reality TV a lot, which I watch a lot of, where one person will say, I hate the drama. I don't want no drama. But meanwhile, they are almost always in the middle of it. So they're out of touch with their need to create that drama, their interest in the drama. And I'll give some other examples of another kind, which is when you see other people as people you have known before, but you have pushed down those parts, like those patterns of that relationship. So you can see this with someone who had a very scary dad and ends up dating very scary men. But because they have pushed down that part of their father and not worked with it, they end up choosing men who behave the same way. And they say they don't want that, yet they keep seeking it because they haven't looked at that relationship with their dad and what it did to them and how scary it really was. So then they don't end up recognizing unsafe men when they're in front of them. They had to see their scary dad is nice enough just to get through childhood, and now they're doing the same thing with men who are scary in their dating life, and they are choosing men who are scary and they're ignoring those aspects of them. For me, this is like, if someone's quiet, I will almost always jump to, you're annoyed with me. And then I get pretty anxious with that. And it takes a lot of work to get to know someone and know that they're just thinking, or they're sad themselves about something else, or has nothing to do with me, but I can project that into them. And this is related to my mother, because my mother was annoyed with me all the time, and she was either showing it or she was quiet and annoyed and not giving me anything, but I knew she was angry or annoyed underneath that. And so for me, she was always annoyed, and so I project that into other people and think they're like my mother a lot, which most people are not like my mother, actually. So, it's a pretty frustrating thing I have to deal with inside of me. This can happen in therapy, like say someone starts therapy with me and they end up finding that because I end sessions on time, this is really disturbing to them. Like, no matter what state they're in, I will end the session on time. That's the agreement. And they could experience me as withholding and cold and uncaring because their mother was cold and withholding and uncaring and controlling and didn't care about them. So that's helpful for me to know that that's the reaction to me keeping the time boundary. And just a tip, like, definitely be thinking about that in your own therapy with your therapist. It's important to keep in mind that you can do this whole projecting thing with positive qualities as well, not just negative ones. So the way to kind of track that sometimes is if you notice yourself idealizing somebody. You think they're so great, they're so smart, they're so put together, they're this, they're that, they're so funny, blah, blah, blah. Because the other end of that is devaluing yourself. So you've projected all the good qualities into them, and I bet you end up feeling not great in comparison. So that doesn't feel good either. So I encourage you to look at that. Like, I have a friend who says everyone around her is brilliant. She uses brilliant all the time. But meanwhile, she says really disparaging things about herself. And I really want her to take some of those good qualities back into her and see how great she is. I really enjoy her. I think she's brilliant, but I would like her to like herself more. And it's like she can't own yet the good things in herself. So she puts some other people and sees them there and celebrates them there. And over time, and I had to do this too, like learn to see good things in myself too. Because actually what can happen is when you put people up on a pedestal like that and you've projected all this good into them, it doesn't feel good to them either, because it's not totally real. Like they're human too. And once you're up on a pedestal, you can only fall. So you taking back some of the good into yourself helps everybody to see things more clearly, because we all have good and bad parts. And none of us, you might think you want to be idealized, but really, it's stressful and anxiety provoking, because what if you mess up and what if you do something wrong? So, that's a lot to think about, but let me know if you have questions about that. On that note, by the way, anyone in a position like a therapist or a coach or a pastor or whatever it is, they should be careful about you idealizing them. They shouldn't let you do that too much. Like, they should own their mistakes. They should own their humanity and not let you put them too high on a pedestal, because that will not help you. You need to feel like you might make mistakes, but also they might make mistakes, and everybody's going to be accountable to them, and nobody's above anybody else in that department. So just a insider tip on that. If you have someone like a therapist or a coach or whatever who will not own negative things in themselves or mistakes, I would say get out of there, because you're not going to feel that good with them. They're in it to prop themselves up and haven't done the work to prop themselves up on their own without you. And I would say that's sketchy, dangerous territory. So we'll move on to the two-person perspective. This is sometimes called projective identification if you want to be fancy with it. But it is the process of that whole, like, something's buried in you, you project it out, you work with it there, but the other end of that, there's a person who empathically receives that through their like little feelers, and it's unconscious. This is usually unconscious, and they pick it up. And if they have what we would call like a valency for that projection, they'll pick it up and they'll embody it, and without thinking. And then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, like you think, oh, I'm right, look at them, look at what they're doing. So this can happen with me. Like, if I can be someone who, my go-to to protect myself is to isolate. Like, people can be dangerous, that kind of thing. And so my go-to can be to isolate. And then of course, what that means is that people don't know how to get to me or what to do for me. And then I end up thinking, no one cares about me. But really what's happened is that I have actually acted like I don't care about anybody. And really that's what I'm doing when I pull away from people, is I'm saying, I don't care about you, I only care about myself. It's sort of primitive, underneath all of that. Like, it's a primitive need to protect myself, but what I'm communicating is that I don't need anybody. And then they act like, then they act accordingly. If you take something like sexism, or any ism probably, you can see how it's persisted in our culture. So, you can say, so people got together and decided, okay, women are only good for their appearance and taking care of kids and being in the home, and that's all they're good for. Women then also think that, and they pick it up. Now, over the course of years, women have learned to believe that that is the only thing that's good about them. And so they pick up the projection, and they try to be attractive, and they just take care of the kids, or they just worked in the home, or whatever it is. And this feeds the idea more and more that that's all women are good for. So it would have taken a lot of, good help by parents to help their daughters not fall into that and to see themselves as more whole people and not just good for appearance or caretaking, that there was more to them. So it takes a lot of work to not pick up the projection. There's so much pressure to pick up the projection. And I think everyone can relate to that feeling of feeling like the pressure to pick up the projection, but especially in cases where it's your parents telling you something about you. Even though it doesn't feel good, it feels bad and it feels critical and judgmental, you feel like that must be true. It's my parents telling me. And so you feel the pressure to pick it up, and so you do, and then you probably behave accordingly, and then they think they're right. There's this woman I love, June Diane Raphael. I don't know if you know that actress, but she has this phrase, "I'm not taking that on." And I think that is such a easy phrase to repeat to yourself when you can sense a projection coming from outside of you and putting pressure on you to behave in that way. You just say, "I'm not taking that on. I'm not taking it on. That's yours. Thank you so much." I deal with this all the time as a therapist. So patients come in and they don't know anything about me. I don't talk about my personal life with them. And so there's all this room to project onto me. And I like it that way because it helps me understand them, helps me understand their mind, and then we can work with that. So what can happen though is someone can come in and maybe project something about their parents onto me. And I might feel the pressure to behave like their parent. So say someone's used to parents who are controlling, who don't listen to them, who don't find much value in what they think. They come to me and they defer to me and they want to ask me a lot of questions about what I think, what should I do? And if I'm not careful, I can step into that role like their parent and tell them what to do or give them advice and tell them how to think, So I have to be careful not to take that and pick that projection up, because then I'm just reinforcing for them the idea that what they think doesn't matter and that they can't think for themselves, that they have no autonomy, and I don't want to do that. And now I'm not perfect at that for sure, but I do try to be as aware of that as possible. And if I do enact something like that with a patient, I try to get out of it and talk about it so we can look at it together and see like, oh, that's interesting. How did that happen? Another example is like feelings getting passed between you and a friend. So say you're talking to a friend and she's telling you all about how some guy treated her and he was really crappy and he did all kinds of crappy things. And you feel anger and rage boiling in you, like, how could he do that? You're my friend, I love you. And you feel protective. And meanwhile, she is pretty calm, pretty chill, not feeling a lot about it. And so what has happened is she has disowned her anger and maybe her fear about what happened and put it into you, and you're feeling that. And she's put it in you for safekeeping. And so it's easier said than done, but finding a way to hand that projection back to your friend is important, because it's important that we all feel our own feelings so that we can act accordingly. So she needs to feel her own anger so that she can do something about it and protect herself, right? She needs to feel her own fear so she can do something about it. So don't totally get filled up with the emotion. Try to give some of it back and hand some of it back. And the best way to do that is just by naming that it's happening. Name that I'm feeling all of this and you're not feeling that much. What's going on? That's an easy way to just get it out there and talk about it. And that kind of thing can happen a lot if you're a pretty sensitive person or very empathic person, like you very easily feel what someone else is feeling. So it is important that you learn how to have boundaries about that and to name it when you're filled up with someone's emotion and they're not feeling it as much. That way you're not left stuck with feelings. Like no one wants to be stuck as the repository and the container for feelings, and the other person's left free of the feeling while you're stuck carrying it around. Like, you don't want that. But that is the work of getting to know yourself. You need to understand, like, what are your feelings? What are someone else's? You need to know yourself well enough to know, like, is that a typical reaction for me, or is that an atypical reaction for me? Is this something about what they're saying, or is this something about that's happened to me? Like, you need to know yourself well enough to do that. Just to keep going and give you more examples so you really get the idea here. So, like, I might have a patient who's telling me, like, his girlfriend, talking about his girlfriend saying, I can't believe she talks to her ex. I would never do that. I just cut it off and that's it. I don't understand why she does that. I really don't get it. And I have to say to him, like, well, remember how when you and your ex broke up, you spent like a year trying to be friendly and have some kind of relationship because you wanted to make sure you could be okay just seeing each other occasionally. He had to think about it and be like, oh yeah. And so in this is, he's willing to take that projection back, right? And he's willing to look at it and think about it. And then he can relate to his partner more, like, oh, okay, I understand where she's coming from. And then that softens things a little between the two of them. And so if he didn't do that, if he were to just say, no, I didn't do that, that's not what was happening, it leaves him stuck, and then it leaves him at odds with his partner, and it creates a false difference between the two of them, a false, like, distance or separation between the two of them, when really they're behaving quite similarly. This could look like you thinking that you might need to stop drinking, but you aren't really ready to think about it yet, and so you keep pushing it down. But then you find yourself talking about how other people are struggling with their drinking, and you get really interested in that and think about that a lot. You know, I'm sorry to reference the Real Housewives again, but you know, this is pretty recent. Ramona has just really given Sonia a hard time on the Real Housewives of New York and talking about her drinking, but meanwhile, Ramona is a psychopath on alcohol the night before. She'll wake up talking about Sonia's problem. It's a nice deflection. So in that example I gave my patient, maybe he'd be willing to take that back, right? Take that projection back. And so it's when these projections become rigid that they become problematic. And so with sexism, like, that was a pretty persistent and rigid idea about women, right? And like a group projection that kept going. Same thing happens with like racist ideas, all the isms. And when we aren't looking at those thoughts and feelings and inspecting them. So for when it came to women, like, weakness and submission was projected out. Like, no man wants to feel that. That's put into women. Like, they're the ones who feel weak and submissive. And that's not me. Well, meanwhile, I'm here to tell you, like, men feel that all the time. Everybody feels that. It's not women. It's when these group projections are out there, and in spite of evidence to the contrary, they persist, that's when they become so problematic. And on that note, if you find yourself being very intolerant of racists, which I can be, so this fits me, but like, that means you're struggling with racist thoughts within yourself, because, you know, science will tell you we all have a racist thoughts. It's just how our brain works. And I don't mean to minimize it, but you know, we are prone to them, and you have to work to not think that way. And so I would encourage you to, if you're finding yourself intolerant of someone who is intolerant, I would look at that tendency in yourself and see what you need to think about there or work with there. The bottom line is, the more open you are to yourself, the more you try to learn about yourself, the more you can own about yourself, the less you will project out, which means your relating with yourself and with other people will go much more smoothly, like I said, because you're not annoying people with your projections, you're seeing them more clearly. And this reminds me, like, I had a friend who, she's supposed to be a close friend, but she kept seeing me in these ways that, like, I'm like, where did that come from? And it was hurtful because I thought she knew me, but it became more and more evident that she didn't. And so you know, eventually that relationship kind of faded because it's like no matter what I did, I couldn't get her to see me accurately. And so I had to know myself well enough to know, like, I'm not what she's saying. And it's not even that it was like bad stuff all the time. It was just like weird stuff about me that I'm like, you're not listening and paying attention, really. You're not hearing me. And so eventually that relationship kind of faded because it's not as deeply known as I want to be, right? So if you want a relationship like that, I encourage you to really look at yourself, and so that you can see yourself and others more clearly. I hope that's been helpful. Let me know what wasn't helpful, what could be more helpful, what else you'd like to know. I've talked a lot today, I feel like. So maybe that's a projection. I have no idea actually if I've talked a lot. I just get nervous about that. You know, for me, I have to, I can worry that I'm taking up too much space. So maybe I've talked a lot, maybe I haven't. I don't know. I have to check the evidence for that and see. But I've really enjoyed doing this today with you, and I hope you'll come back and let me know what you want me to talk about. And I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.